Flying. When most of us think of flying, we think of airports, airplanes, the TSA, long lines, maybe even a vacation that we've taken an airplane ride in order to get to our vacation destination. For most of my life, I've been an admirer of aviation, and I've actually been lucky enough to become a pilot, both helicopter and fixed wing. Helicopters are a valuable resource that can fly from point A to point B without the long runways required by an airplane. After today, it's my hope that we'll be able to recognize a little bit of the necessity that helicopters, and a little bit of the necessity of the role helicopters play in our day-to-day lives. First, we'll examine some of the basic mechanics and aerodynamics of how helicopters function, and second, we'll talk a little bit about some of the diverse mission sets that helicopters do on a regular basis. Learning how to fly a helicopter was much more complicated than it was learning how to fly an airplane. If you think about it, an airplane, if the engines quit, well, you've got those big giant wings out on the sides. You're still going to continue to glide because you have those wings that'll enable that. A helicopter, if the engines quit, well, you're out of luck and there's nothing providing lift for you anymore, and you basically are just a falling chunk of steel, and it doesn't usually end well. Helicopters are used for a variety of different things. For example, they install cell phone towers up on the high ridge lines in the mountains. They do the ski poles, the big ski towers for the chairlifts and the ski resorts. They do a lot of construction use. Firefighting, the police use them, and the military has a broad range of mission sets that they use helicopters for as well. I'd like to ask a question. How does a helicopter work? You ever thought about that? Well, when I was in flight school learning to fly helicopters a little while ago, our instructors used to have this little joke that anytime that question was asked, their response was PFM, pure freaking magic. And then, as I went through helicopter flight school and learned how helicopters work, well, that's basically how they work, is just pure freaking magic. That's literally what keeps them flying. But what really happens is it's coordinated, complex movements of the flight controls that allows you to go up, down, left, right, fore and aft, depending on the direction you want to go, of course. Basic flight controls are you have your cyclic that rests in between your legs. If you're at a stationary hover, you push forward, it goes forward, back, does that thing for you. On the left-hand side, your left hand is using a collective. It's down here by your knee. When you raise your collective, that's going to collectively change the pitch in your rotor blades, causing the aircraft to come off the ground. So basically, when you're on the ground, the rotor blades are flat pitched. When you raise your collective, it's going to change the pitch of the blades. So it's going to cause the blades to literally take a bigger bite out of the air and provide lift for you. Then you have your directional pedals that if you're at a hover and you want your nose to point to the right, you just push on your right pedal and it'll go that way, that direction. But in order to understand some of the basic principles of helicopters, we first must understand some basic aerodynamics. In an article published on howstuffworks.com, Marshall Bryan and William Harris conducted an interview in 1971 with broadcast journalist Harry Reasoner. And Harry Reasoner said, this is regarding the use of helicopters in Vietnam. Harry Reasoner said, an airplane by its nature wants to fly. A helicopter does not want to fly. It is maintained in the air by a variety of forces and controls working in opposition to each other. And if there is any disturbance in this delicate balance, the helicopter stops flying immediately and disastrously. In order for a helicopter to fly, basic aerodynamics apply. Lift must be greater than the weight of the helicopter. And in order to achieve forward flight, your thrust must be greater than the drag pulling on the aircraft, keeping it in place. And all this applies basically to hover. Getting into forward flight is a whole different animal. But then there's one more phenomenon that applies into helicopter aerodynamics. It's called gyroscopic precession. When we were in 5th grade or whatever it was, we did this science fair project where you took a string and you put an object on the string and then you let it go and you tried to hit the wall. But in order for it to go in the direction you wanted it to go, you had to release it 90 degrees prior. Same thing with helicopter aerodynamics. In order for the control inputs you want to manifest themselves in the direction they want, they must be first applied 90 degrees prior. Luckily, there's pulleys and push tubes that are connected to the flight control. So when you push forward, what really happens is that input is applied 90 degrees prior, so off to the right, but then that is manifested out in front of you and you go the direction you want to go. So I'd like to share some concluding thoughts on helicopters. Helicopters are amazing machines that don't need a long runway to be able to land and take off, and they make it possible for them to get into tight confined spaces. They also provide a dynamic function with the many uses. with which we employ them for medical to construction, scenic tours to military use. In closing, I give an overview of the basic functions of helicopters to include some basic aerodynamics and some of their functions of how a helicopter works, and I provided some information regarding some of their diverse missions that they accomplish. In closing, I hope that we are all able to recognize the importance of helicopters and the effect that they have on day-to-day operations in our lives. And just remember, the next time, if you're ever lucky enough to take a Grand Canyon tour or anything like that, you might be a little nervous getting into that helicopter with all those many parts and pieces rotating above your head, but just remember that if you're nervous, chances are the pilots are just as nervous as well.